broadcasting live from home today. New studio for us on Monday. I told you, I think I talked to some of y'all about this yesterday, that I was going to be trying to essentially pack up the studio yesterday, and if it could all fit, we were just going to say goodbye to the old one. And so that's basically what we did. So no real place to broadcast today. That puts us here until we're able to kind of begin our brand new journey there on Monday. You really don't care about any of that. You just want the show. But that is sort of the story of kind of where things stand here today. So what we're going to do for a couple of minutes here, we're going to dive in here, take a few of your comments. I think we're going to have a really fun conversation. A lot of that's going to center around Georgia recruiting, interesting stuff out there on that Jeff Sentell is going to tell us more about. So we'll get all of that here coming up in just a couple of minutes. For now, let me dive in here. We'll get your comments. We'll sort of find out what's on your mind here as we do a fun little Friday. And, of course, get you into the weekend. By the way, congrats to the Diamond Dogs getting the weekend started early with their win last night against Texas A&M. Deficit early, came back from that, got the win, and now in position to win the series against Texas A&M, a team that really needs it more than Georgia does probably. So that speaks well of what Georgia's doing. And also Georgia can go undefeated in home series here this year and, most importantly, put itself in a strong position to be a national seed. So all that's on the way. Matt Rugavina says, shameless plug, but today is my and along with his wonderful wife, Gabby, who we met out in Texas, 10-year anniversary. So happy Friday indeed. And it is a happy Friday. I am so thrilled to hear that for you, Matt. Glad to have you celebrating some of that anniversary with us here. That is really good stuff. UGA Marine also pointing out the Georgia softball team begins its NCAA regional in Durham, North Carolina today. So we wish them well on that. SEM Dog, speaking of good news, celebrating his birthday for his wife, who's they've been married now 45 years. SEM Dog, that's awesome stuff. Let's see what else. Of course, I get criticized at DawgNation.com. That never stops. No good deed ever goes unpunished. DT also pointing out, yes, we are broadcasting. I don't know if it's a palatial estate, but it is our humble home nonetheless. Will Dickerson checking in from Trenton, Georgia. Will, we're glad you are here. A lot of fun there on that. So good stuff here. And as we said before, a really fun show today. It's Jeff Sentell. We're going to try to get to Jeff a few minutes earlier than we sometimes do because there is kind of what's next for Georgia recruiting across an entire array of positions. So we'll get to that with Jeff. But let me also get ready to kind of fire up the animation because we got a really fun show on tap for you. So let's fire up that animation. We'll tell you all about it. Glad to have you with us here on a Friday. Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Our friend K-Dog in our Dog Nation comment section says, BA, why are you at home today? So we have talked a little bit about this, but different people hear different things. So yesterday ended up being the final day for us at what has been our studio now. It's hard to remember how long it's been. More than a year, maybe 2 years. It's hard. It honestly gets a little bit hard to remember after a little while. We had the initial plan of maybe we'd stay all the way through Friday. We kind of knew that Monday would be our first day in the brand new studio, but honestly had some stuff to move out on my little trinkets and things like that. So we kind of did all that yesterday and said, okay, kind of a transition day here. We'll be from home. And then on Monday, we'll kind of chart a brand new journey there from our brand new studio, which we are really excited about. And honestly, as I told you, it kind of took me a while to get there. Our good friend Jay Black, Cody Chafins, they've been working so hard behind the scenes to kind of get the studio ready. Obviously, we've had an entire team of folks helping them, folks who've kind of joined us and been a part of that. So we've got a lot of really smart people working behind the scenes, but I'm just really averse to change. And so therefore, probably wasn't super excited about that change. But as we get closer and closer to the debut, I think it's really coming together well. In fact, if you saw our Jackson Cantwell special this week, the Jared Curtis special last week, that was actually in the new studio. It was zoomed in tight. We didn't do a lot of the, sort of larger scale stuff, but we've already done a couple of broadcasts from there and it's gone really, really well. So this is sort of the transition day before we get ready for that on Monday, because the studio where we have been broadcasting from, it doesn't look very much like Dog Nation's world headquarters as much anymore because I took all my stuff home. So that is sort of the story there on that. But what you care about is what we're going to do on today's show. A lot of this is recruiting with Jeff Sentell. Really excited about that. Georgia had a big visit last night, apparently, with one of the biggest names in the recruiting board. We'll tell you about that. There's major rumor out there involving another prospect. What's real on that? We'll try to figure that out. Where does Georgia go next when it comes to big NIL dollars and elite offensive line prospects? We'll kind of cover all of that with Jeff Sentell here today, too. But to kick things off, you're going to find this to be interesting. There is a little bit of pushback and criticism against Georgia coach Kirby Smart today. We think probably unfairly. All of this, I think, leads to a question that needs to be answered kind of about what's next for both Georgia and college football. I think this is fun, interesting topic for a Friday. So I'm really glad to have you with us as we explored. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get it all started. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
If you're listening podcast, we are at home today. Show may sound just slightly different than normal. This is a one-day thing for us. Brand new studio journey begins on Monday. All of that we've kind of talked about. So let's instead kind of get into what matters here today. Now, I realize on every show, whether I'm broadcasting from our normal studio or broadcasting here from home, I just sort of talk and talk and talk and talk. And I do understand that. I'm kind of a robot. You wind me up, and I'll just keep right on going. I say so many words over the course of a show, over the course of a week, frankly, over the course of what feels like a lifetime doing the show, that perhaps, and as much as it pains me to admit, maybe you haven't been always listening as attentively to every single one of those words. I am humble enough to admit that maybe some of this perhaps has gone in one ear and out the other. Totally understand that. That's just life. That's just human nature. So with that in mind, let me say this to begin things here today. I am going to lead into, over the course of the next few minutes, up to one question that I think needs to be asked about Kirby Smart, about Georgia football, the role that NIL plays for this program and this sport moving forward. And I do think this is an important question. So I'm sort of giving you the last page of the book to begin the show here today. So stick with me for a couple of minutes, and I want to see if I can get us all to what I think is a pretty important place for us to go here today. But to get there, I need to tell you this, that, and we see this happen every now and then, Kirby Smart sort of finds himself as the subject of some criticism today. Now, if you're a leader of men and you're in the spotlight, criticism is just sort of a natural thing. Teddy Roosevelt, man in the arena speech, things of that nature. You sort of already know that just sort of comes with the territory. But there is a specific brand of criticism. It sort of feels like Kirby Smart perhaps is starting to get a little bit lately. I think this is worth us exploring. We played you a clip yesterday of Kirby Smart on with Paul Finebaum. We thought it might be sort of a subtle pushback against Paul, who had been pretty critical of Georgia for some stuff on the field. But there was another thing from that interview that Smart gave to Paul Finebaum on Wednesday when Paul was at the big Celebrity Pro-Am event that Kirby participates each year, that has gotten some attention over the course of the last 24 hours or so, especially in light of the Jackson Cantwell news that did not go Georgia's way earlier this week. The subject of NIL came up, and what Kirby said, in keeping with what he said in the past, has kind of gotten some attention. So to get us where we need to go today, let me let you hear Kirby with Finebaum, and then after that, I'll tell you why some people did not necessarily love Kirby's remarks. This is earlier this week, Kirby from the Paul Finebaum Show speaking about the subject of NIL.
Where we are right now, I think every coach agrees we're in a good place with being able to compensate players. Call it pay for play, call it NIL. I don't care what you call it. We're all in a good place with that. We just want it to be in a way that's sustainable. I just want it to be able to, have a freshman come in and not make more than a senior. And I'd like for other sports to be able to still survive. We're on the brink of probably 1 to 2 years away from a lot of schools cutting sports. What's the pushback going to be then when you start cutting non-revenue sports? I don't want that to happen.
So there you have it. Kirby Smart saying, I don't want freshmen on my team, unproven commodities, making more than the seniors. And I don't want the runaway train of NIL to ruin college sports beyond football as we've known it, taking away these, in some cases, we'll call them non-revenue sports. That's what Kirby says. That seems like common sense to some people. That just seems like conventional thinking to others. But there is a certain stripe of person for whom that is very controversial. Kirby says he doesn't want to pay freshmen as much as other guys are getting paid. Let me show you a couple of examples here of people who kind of live in the legal space, whether it be reporters covering the legal side of sports or actual attorneys who now exist in the NIL space. And I want to give you a couple of remarks they put on X yesterday, directly responding to Kirby's particular statement to give you an idea of why Smart's statement about, I don't want freshmen making more than seniors, to give you an idea about why that's controversial. Let me start with this. A guy named Mitt Winter, who is an attorney working here now. He says, if coaches want rookie salary scales like those that exist in pro sports, they should be pushing for a model with collective bargaining. They keep asking for all kinds of things that would be possible with bargaining. Otherwise, they violate antitrust law. So here you have a guy named Mitt Winter, who's into the whole legal, sports thing, obviously very interested in the labor law and its impact on athletics, says, Kirby Smart, what you're calling for trust law. Well, he's not the only one who feels that way. You may have heard the name Michael McCann before. He works for an outlet called Sportico. Once again, kind of the intersection of legal, labor, sports, compensation, things like that. Much the same way Mitt Winter says what he says. Michael McCann also responds much the same way, citing the Kirby Smart quote here and says, that sounds like a rookie wage scale, which is common in pro sports because of the leagues negotiate them with the players' union. That could happen in college sports too if players were unionized employees. So what you've got, very smart people, very well educated, who live in very big cities, you've got them saying, to the rest of us, the sort of, common folk who like college athletics, well, if you want something that feels like a sensible compensation structure for college athletics, you're going to have to make them into employees and you're going to have to collectively bargain with them. Otherwise, it's a violation of antitrust law. This, by the way, as a quick aside, kind of goes back to why I said no matter how much you may have a dislike for politics, either all politicians or just one side of the aisle, the politicians are the only thing that can save you from this, because the politicians, at least theoretically, should represent the will of the people. And the will of the people is against the sort of, obsession with labor law that seems to exist with certain corridors of the sports media industry right now. And so if you want something that makes sense, the politicians giving you some sort of the antitrust exemption that other professional sports have sort of feels like that's probably an important next step. We'll see if it ever gets there. But beyond that, let's just stay at the face value part of this here for a moment. And the criticism that Kirby Smart is getting, who people are saying, who is Kirby Smart, who makes, it always comes back to what Kirby himself makes $13 million a year, whatever it is the Kirby salary is. Who is Kirby Smart to be telling these freshmen they shouldn't be making more than a senior? Who is Kirby Smart to be doing this sort of thing? And that's where it kind of leads to the question that needs to be asked about Georgia's NIL. But before I get to that, let me make another point here briefly just for a moment. I think a lot of Georgia fans also kind of wonder about this too. I think it makes them nervous when they hear their coach out of step with what seems like a growing consensus of very well-educated people who live in big cities who say, Kirby Smart's just sort of behind the times, and this is not what college athletics is anymore. I think there are two things, though, that Georgia fans who hear this and get a little nervous should perhaps consider about all of this. Thing number one is, for as long as I've been around, and I've been following college sports essentially my entire life, there's always some coach somewhere, and it's oftentimes for different reasons throughout the decades, but there's always some coach somewhere who the media is sort of painting as behind the times, someone who needs to get with the program and realize that things are changing. There is a certain aspect of media that sort of always favors radical over traditional. That's something you'll perhaps notice. And in this particular case, Kirby Smart's attempt to hold on to what some people view as tradition in college athletics just isn't in keeping with the radical trends that seem to be running wild around college athletics right now. But the truth is, Kirby Smart's not the only one recently who's sort of been painted this way. I mean, think about Dabo Swinney at Clemson, for instance. And a lot of Georgia fans sort of like it when Dabo gets kicked around in the media. But Dabo is also one of these guys because of his aversion to, say, the transfer portal, things like that. He's also been sort of treated as someone who's behind the times. Forget the fact that he's won 2 national championships. Dabo, I think a lot of people sort of think, well, the game has just sort of passed him by. But the truth is, has it? When you look ahead to this upcoming season, there's a very good chance that Clemson's a preseason top 5 team after having been in the playoff a year ago and having won 2 national championships prior to that. In other words, the media's proclamation of so-and-so coach is behind the times doesn't actually always end up working out exactly the way that you think that it might. And I would say the same thing potentially could be true for Kirby Smart. But also beyond that, there's this. Let's not always assume that every single thing that Kirby Smart says is intended to be taken exactly at face value. Sometimes some of this is just a negotiation ploy. And while, Smart is a football coach by trade, there seems to be a little bit of a business-minded kind of vibe that he certainly seems to exist with, where he understands that one of the key tenets of a successful person, whether you're an employee working for a business or you own your own business, it's the idea of under-promising and over-delivering. For instance, if my boss comes to me and asks for something, and if I say back to them, hey, can I get this to you by the end of the week? Well, I may be setting myself up to see if I can also get it back to them that same day. I'm under-promising, I'll get it to you by Friday, while over-delivering, maybe I try to get it to them that day. It just makes me look better. It's just an effective strategy. And I would say that there's also some of that in this too. That when Smart says, I don't want to pay freshmen like I pay seniors, that's essentially under-promising to those prospects with the potential of also over-delivering to them in the actual negotiations. Because the truth is, Kirby Smart certainly isn't as allergic to NIL as he seems to kind of be setting himself up for in conversations like that. If he was, then Georgia would not be a factor in all the prospects it's currently in very deep relationship with. In fact, let me show you this on the screen for a moment. So last night, we have evidence that Georgia defensive coordinator Glenn Schumann and one of Georgia's most important defensive assistants, Travaris Robinson, they're hanging out with Tyler Atkinson, the 5-star linebacker from Grayson, Georgia. Now, Atkinson is one of the best, and we'll show you this on the screen. Atkinson is one of the best players, regardless of position, in all of college athletics. If Kirby didn't really want to pay freshmen high dollars, if he wasn't really willing to do that sort of thing, then would Georgia even have an opportunity to be hanging out with Tyler Atkinson? Would there even be a chance that Atkinson could end up going to a place like Georgia? We would say no. So just keep in mind that some of the statements, like what Smart said on the Paul Finebaum show, is a little bit of an example of under-promising and over-delivering. To say, I don't want NIL for freshmen, but for certain freshmen, hey, maybe you're just worth it. Maybe you are worth the same amount of money to my program that a proven senior would be. It's just sort of basic overall strategy. But that said, we now arrive at this, which is the question that I think needs to be asked about Georgia and the role that NIL plays in college athletics going forward. And it's simply this. When Kirby says, boy, I'm not in love with paying freshmen as much as some people want to pay them, he is actually creating a lane to his left to be passed by other programs. So here's the question. How come they don't take advantage of that? If Kirby Smart is sort of saying one thing, how come there isn't an attempt by other programs to take advantage of the space that Kirby leaves to differentiate themselves from him? For instance, we've been told that a program like, say, Oregon, a big spender because of Phil Knight's money, Texas, a big spender because of all the oil money, Miami, a big spender because of their sort of megawatt boosters. How come they don't brag about it and say, hey, Georgia, I'm sorry you're poor. I'm sorry you don't want to pay these freshmen, but we're open for business. And nobody's paying freshmen more so than we are. This is the big question. If Smart is so wrong about his viewpoint about NIL, how come more people don't try to call him out for how wrong that he is? One of the things that caused me to think that was something I heard earlier this week from a guy called Ari Wasserman. You may know him from On3. He was talking about Jackson Cantwell's decision to go to Miami, and he kind of made the point of, Miami ought to be bragging about its NIL prowess when it comes to all of this. Let me let you hear Wasserman, then I'll give you a follow-up to what he had to say. Take a listen.
We have to stop this clinging to the past where it's family atmosphere, and this is an entirely different ballgame. It's not recruiting from 2005 anymore, okay? So you should be celebrating that Miami has deployed NIL effectively. You should be celebrating that Miami has done something to level the playing field. And if you're not a Miami fan and your team gets a 5-star prospect they otherwise probably wouldn't have gotten away from a traditional recruiting powerhouse as a result of NIL, be happy. It's good when your program is functional enough to offer the type of money that is attractive to a player that can help you win a league title.
So here's a question, and it's not rhetorical. Ari Wasserman says, hey, if you're Miami and you spend big on a freshman, you got to be bragging about it. Okay. How come they don't? How come Texas doesn't brag about all the money it's allegedly paid to freshmen? And how come Oregon, another big spender, doesn't do the same thing? If it's something you should brag about, if it represents your prowess more so than some sort of deficiency, how come there isn't more bragging about that going on? And I think the answer is because somehow, some way, it just doesn't feel quite right. That something about this seems to bump into something in our own souls, and I do think we have souls. Something sort of bumps into some of this that's not quite so right. I think there's also the practical reality of the fact that if we're going to open up college athletics where freshmen make this much money going forward, then it creates a series of dominoes that we don't necessarily love. For instance, I thought my colleague Jeff Sentell had a great story at DawgNation.com the other day where he had a chance to catch up with the super agent Drew Rosenhaus, the representative for Jackson Cantwell. And in that story, I thought Drew Rosenhaus gave Jeff a very interesting quote. You've heard a lot said about the House settlement and the way in which that's going to structure compensation payments moving forward. And in the midst of that, Drew Rosenhaus, a figure that I do think that some people view as unsavory, fairly or not, made a statement that I think a lot of people view as unsavory, once again, whether it's fair or not. I'll show this to you on the screen here. Drew Rosenhaus saying that when it comes to House settlement, we need to see if it's going to withstand all the forthcoming legal challenges that are going to be on the way. See, this is the part that sort of bothers people. And this is why even the biggest spending programs when it comes to NIL, I don't think they love bragging about this. I think somehow, some way doesn't quite seem right. If college athletics all of a sudden has a lot of Drew Rosenhaus type characters walking around. And if there's even more legal challenges than there already are, that doesn't seem like a very fun landscape. And so I'll take it back to Kirby Smart here just for a moment. I think there is a chance that what Kirby Smart is saying of, I want to pay my seniors more than my freshmen. I don't want to give a bunch of money to a lot of guys who are unproven. I think there's a chance when it's all said and done, not next week, not next month, but maybe a few years from now, as old-fashioned as this idea is, I still hold out a lot of hope that college athletics may actually move back in that direction before it's all said and done. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Kroger. We are so happy to have you with us, no matter how you're getting to us today. I'm at home today. That's a one-day thing. We're back, brand new studio for us on Monday. And, of course, however you get to us, we're thrilled to have you as a part of the show today, and so thankful to our friends at Kroger who make it all possible. You know, we're kind of rolling into, I don't know why this is, but for me, yesterday, it sort of felt like summer kind of began. It was very hot. And it just sort of felt like, okay, well, summer's really here now because it's like, I don't know, 80 whatever degrees. It's pretty hot. And when you think about great stuff in the summer, you think about our great friends from Kroger, whether it's graduation parties, whether it's, you know, cookouts. Obviously, we got Memorial Day, 4th of July on the way. And if you want to take advantage of these great moments, we love the summer. Come and get Kroger Boost members. Great way to do that. You get twice the fuel points on the things you're already buying at your local Kroger, and you can take advantage of free grocery delivery, free grocery pickup. Super convenient, saves you money, and you can find out more about it by going online, Kroger.com/boost for more on that today. Kroger.com/boost for more on that today. All right, we're going to get Jeff Sentell here coming up in just a little bit. Jeff is standing by, and so I want to talk to him about everything that's going on, basically what's coming next for Georgia after the Jackson Cantwell news, but also big recruiting rumor, a lot of fun that's out there right now. And we'll get more in detail about the picture that we all just saw of Tyler Atkinson hanging out with a couple of Georgia coaches too. All of this with Jeff coming up. As a lead into that, though, let me very quickly go around the DawgHouse presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And I want to follow up on everything that I just said by saying this, is that when Kirby Smart runs against the grain of what is kind of a growing consensus that things are changing, got to get with the times, and you got to pay, exorbitant, compensation to these freshmen, Smart says, I want to move a little slower. And right now we would say that's working pretty well for Georgia. We expect another elite class in 2026, and Georgia will be among the favorites to win the 2025 national championship. So far, all of this is working out pretty well. But what about the future? And that's the thing we said before. We don't 100% know that necessarily, but it's important to know that when Kirby kind of places his bet on, I'm going to try to stay traditional as long as I can. This is a thing where he does have some skin in the game in all of this. On a completely different interview than the one we just played from the Paul Finebaum show, Kirby was also on with Greg McElroy and Cole Kubelik from their show on WJOX, the radio station in Birmingham. And the subject came up of why Georgia, unlike some other programs, hasn't gone the way of hiring a full-fledged general manager the way you see in the NFL and other professional sports. And this is why I say when Kirby's got some skin in the game, Smart, in the clip you're about to hear, makes it very clear he wants to remain in control of all the decision-making when it comes to Georgia football. But in order to do that, the vision that he has for the future of college athletics to some degree has to come true. So when Smart says, I want to do it this way, not the other way, keep in mind that if that doesn't work, then very likely, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, that the structure of the decision-making for Georgia football probably ends up looking a little bit different too. So in light of that, let me let you hear Kirby Smart on the subject of why he doesn't want a general manager for Georgia football. Then after that, we'll bring on Jeff Sentell.
I don't want a GM tag to say, okay, well, this guy's going to just go and be the negotiator. He's going to go and close the deal and sign the deal. It's still a relationship business for us. If we were drafting and we could go across the state and say, okay, this is our draft pick, I think a GM role is really, really important. But when you have to have a relationship with somebody, how does that GM have a relationship with somebody when they have been watching tape? They're not spending time with them. Most of those GMs that are true GMs, they don't want to recruit. They don't want to have a relationship. They came from NFL because they weren't doing those things. So they become transactional. And look, we find our niche in our culture, which is relational and trying to have a relationship with somebody. We have people that do GM jobs. We don't sit here and say, well, Coach Smart does everything. I can't do everything. We have people that talk numbers. We have people that do different things. Sure. We just don't have somebody that's making the ultimate decision because that guy doesn't know the market sometimes. He's trying to figure the market out. Mm-hmm. The NFL, the GM knows the market because it's set. So a guy walks into Oklahoma, let's say, and he's the GM. That's great. That's awesome. But he may not know the entire structure and market that's out there, and you may overpay. You may not have a chance to get somebody.
So that's a long way towards getting to the point that what Kirby's really saying is he wants to be in control of all the decision-making as it relates to Georgia football. And given the success that Kirby has had and given his ability to sort of recognize whether trends will impact the sport in the past, I think he deserves that decision-making power. But that also is, to a degree, somewhat dependent on getting this part of it right, too. Smart says our compensation structure is going to reward upperclassmen, proven commodities, more so than the unproven commodity of an incoming freshman. That's a pretty big bet Smart is making, and he's got some real skin in the game when it comes to how the structure of the organization will look going forward if he perhaps gets this wrong. And that is around the DawgHouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, listen, I love what Zagoria Law can do for all of you when you perhaps find yourself in a really tough situation. Let's say that you're out at a park or something like that. Some dog gets loose, an owner doesn't take proper care. There's negligence involved. Well, in that situation, we think you deserve any type of compensation the way that you normally would in any kind of personal injury situation, pain and suffering, medical bills, things like that. That's what Zagoria Law can provide for you. They work very hard with this very specific aspect of personal injury law, and they can put that level of resource to work for you if you find yourself in need. So I want you to find them online. It's Zagoria Law if you find yourself You can find out more from them today about what they can do for you. ZagoriLaw.com. You can also give them a call if you'd like to there as well. 833-GA dog bite, dog spelled conventionally DOG. 833-GA dog bite, doing great work for people who've been injured, bitten by a dog, negligent owner, not taking proper care. If you've been hurt by that, our friends at Zagoria Law want to help you, and we're glad to have them as a part of Around the DawgHouse here today. We're also glad to have our friend Jeff Sentell as a part of the program. A lot to say when it comes to Georgia recruiting, especially around the scavenger hunt taking place this weekend. Georgia already getting some FaceTime and some elite recruits here this week. And, of course, what's next post Jackson Cantwell. Let's cover that and more with Jeff Sentell here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always love Jeff Sentell on a Friday. Some of these conversations have a little bit more to cover than others, this perhaps being one of those. Jeff, let me bring you on the discussion I was just having, then we'll kind of get to everything else. Kirby kind of took a little bit of, I don't want to say heat, but it definitely got a lot of attention. At the very least, there was that when it comes to what he said about NIL and the Finebaum show on Friday. It seems like conventional wisdom to a lot of people. There is a certain sliver of very well-educated people who are obsessed with labor law, who sort of feel like, ooh, you can't say that. When he says, I want proven commodities, I want seniors, upperclassmen making more on my roster than these sort of incoming freshmen, the unproven commodity. Georgia only recruits elite prospects. So we presume that he even means this for like the sort of top 4 and 5-star guys that Georgia primarily brings in. What do you make of the fact that Smart is content to kind of stay in his sort of traditional lane and leaving the sort of wild, reckless, aggressive bidding wars, leaving those for somebody else? How much longer do you think that can work? Can it work in perpetuity?
Morning, Brandon. Good morning, everybody. I think the main thing there is roster. I don't want to say equality, Brandon, but like take for example this year, okay? Like this past season would be a great example. Tate Ratledge, let's say he was making X amount of dollars. I'll just throw out a number. It's probably, I'm not trying to be accurate with his number, but let's say the number is like, I don't know, $600,000. That was what Tate was getting for his senior season at Georgia. And then you bring in a talented freshman. Maybe that is a Daniel Calhoun or a Michael Uni, and he's already making more than Tate Ratledge. Well, I think that creates inequality in terms of, well, sooner or later that guy's going to play, or sooner or later that guy has to get on the field. And I just honestly think, Brandon, it's an old-fashioned way of doing things where he needs to see proof on the field and proof in there. But let's be honest, Brandon, offensive tackles, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, pass rushers, those are an aberration. You're not going to find those guys coming in. Like a proven all-SEC tackle is not going to leave South Carolina or Vanderbilt or Mississippi State and go to an Alabama or Georgia for, $2.5 million. Some of that Jackson Cantwell money. I just don't think it's feasible. I don't think schools and programs let those type of players go. And the whole thing about Kirby and the GM, Brandon, there's nobody better dictating the day-to-day and every microsecond of Georgia football and his roster than Kirby Smart. And I think that's a big benefit Georgia has with all the GM culture around here right now.
And as I said a moment ago, I think it's interesting with Smart content to go public, and he's done this a few times, sort of staying in the traditional lane of, hey, we want compensation that sort of feels somewhat sensible based on production on the field. He's leaving a lane wide open for somebody to step up and say, I'm sorry, Georgia's poor, but we're paying freshmen. We're open for business. No one's going to pay us more than you do. There's a big chance to score some real points by painting yourself in opposition to what Kirby Smart says. And Jeff, to me, the most fascinating stuff in life is always the dog that doesn't bark. And the fact that no one is really doing that, I think is pretty telling. That you've got media people saying, you don't be bragging about the NIL money you're spending. But the fact that nobody does is at least telling. It at least means something to me that supposedly Kirby Smart is so wrong for his traditional stance. But the more radical stance, no one's willing to say that out loud on the record of, oh my gosh, yeah, we love the fact that we're paying, unproven commodities, millions and millions of dollars, and we've got the financial wherewithal to do that. And I'm sorry if you can't keep up. The fact that no one is willing to say that out loud is at least pretty telling to me. People can decide what they think it means, but I do think it means something.
But here's something I got to add to this discussion. Think about Georgia, right? And it's almost like your family in the grocery bill, right? Like if you've only got a finite amount of money for the groceries and you spend a lot of money on like a Boston butt for the grocery bill and half the family doesn't like it, well, then all of a sudden everything is amiss with your budget. Think about this for a second, Brandon. If you want to go, and it all falls under, Peaches wants to say hi this morning. I can't believe this. If you think about your grocery budget, right? And you think about like, think about the guys Georgia just signed in the last class, Brandon. Joseph Jonah-Janye, 5-star. You could have paid for him if you're another school in the SEC. Ellis Robinson, 5-star. Justin Williams, 5-star. Chris Cole, 5-star. How much did those guys play last year at a place like Georgia? Not very much. Second team, third team reps, spot rotation. Now KJ Bolden hit, but I think that's because it was just that Georgia's pretty weak at the safety spot. So, I mean, it's one of those things where if you look at the finite pool and Georgia's number will be 13, 14 million, if you win a Jackson Cantwell decision, then all of a sudden that's an upside down roster in which you've got to pay the rest of your program, including your established starters and your future likely NFL draft picks.
All right, let me move on to some specific recruiting stuff here for a moment. It was an interesting rumor earlier this week when Xavier Griffin, the 5-star linebacker from Gainesville, who I do like, I have a little bit of a soft spot for those guys from Hall County, of course. When Griffin decommits from USC, it rhymes so much with so many stories we've heard in the past, whether it be, Isaiah Gibson or Michael Williams. There's so much of that from the past of guy going to USC. Oh, no, he's not. Now he's coming to Georgia. That I think that the initial assumption is, well, Griffin just must be the next one of those guys. And Griffin is a really good player. But the photo we showed a little earlier last night, Glenn Schumann, Travaris Robinson hanging out with Tyler Atkinson, to me, and it's always dangerous to read too much into it, to me, that's a strong indication that as good a player as Griffin might be, the priority for Georgia at linebacker, whether it gets him or not, is Tyler Atkinson. So I'm going to throw all that out at you. Is Griffin visiting Georgia? Some people have said that he might. Is Griffin still an option for Georgia, or are they all in on Tyler Atkinson? What can you tell us about this interesting, series of events as it relates to Georgia linebacker recruiting?
Yeah, Brandon, that's a good one. It's probably be an annual rite of May or spring when the early USC commit from the Peach State backs off that thing, maybe when the commitment funds run out. But I think it's always been Tyler, Brandon. And, one thing, we always try to, remain positive, not be so much of a tastemaker with a lot of these players. And I still have the same opinion for Xavier Griffin, and it's getting better. But Brandon, I just don't know how physical he is. Now, he is a stalker. He's a guy that can go find the ball, but I think I need to see him be a little bit more physical for me to give him that, that perch where Tyler Atkinson rests. And, we always have these great conversations on Friday, Brennan. One thing I couldn't wait to ask you about this week, and I think it's pretty frank for me, if Georgia loses the Jackson Cantwell decision, which they did, what happens, or is there any out here if Georgia does not win the bidding for Mark Bowman and Tyler Atkinson? Like, do you think those funds need to be freed up to win those chases for both of those players?
Well, look, that's a complicated answer for me because, I agree with a lot of other people. I think that Mark Bowman is an amazing looking prospect. And Atkinson, once again, is always going to be a guy I'm a little bit biased in favor of just because I've seen him play since he was a freshman in high school. I feel like I know him better than so many of these others. But I can't gloss over the need for offense. You got to have elite offensive tackles in your program. And the easiest way to get an elite offensive tackle is to have an elite offensive tackle prospect. So at some point in time in the future, Georgia's got to figure out, okay, well, if the going rate is a price you don't want to pay, then what's the plan for getting elite offensive tackles? And that, by the way, is not that's a legitimate question. Now, as I've said on the show a couple of times this week, I think you can postpone that answer for a little while because if Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green are really good, that's way more important than anything related to Jackson Cantwell. And if guys like, Juan Gaston, could step in and be an offensive tackle for you, maybe starting in 2026. Okay, well, that also sort of postpones that too. And maybe by then the world feels a little more sensible than it perhaps feels when it comes to NIL this week. So getting Atkinson, getting Bowman, that's great. I think they're both amazing prospects. Offensive tackle is a more premium position. It just is. Now, that doesn't mean that Cantwell's a better player than either of the two guys we just mentioned. Honestly, no one knows. But you've got to have elite offensive tackles. So for now, maybe on the current roster, you have enough, 2 for this year, the potential for more in 2026. But at some point in time over the course of the next couple of years, you got to sort of figure out, does the market kind of become a little more logical? Does the market start to make a little bit more sense? Or is this just the price for elite offensive tackles, and you've got to change the way you go about your negotiations? Georgia doesn't have to answer that today, but sometime within the next 24 months, either because the sport changes or Georgia changes, that answer is going to have to come.
Brandon, let me add two quick kind of rapid fire points to that discussion, because I think folks need to hear this. The natural thing I heard from our readers and our audience was, hey, take that money, make sure you win Bowman's sweepstakes. Take that money, apply it to Atkinson, especially in this rumor culture we're hearing right now where Atkinson's price is going up and up and up, seeing everything else. Perhaps the best way to spend that money, Brandon, is to actually think about Juan Gaston in 2026, because Georgia got him at a discount compared to what these numbers are right now. And Gaston's going to play very well this fall, I believe. Perhaps those funds need to be earmarked for a guy that's already currently on your roster for roster retention. So that's just one thing I wanted to add to that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably fair. And look, for as good as I think Mark Bowman is, and this is sort of a theoretical discussion, it kind of gets confusing, but let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, he turns out to be a 9 level player. And let's say that Jackson Cantwell on a scale of 1 to 10, is a 9 level player. Let's say they're both 9 out of 10, no matter how you would define that. Then Cantwell's more valuable than Bowman is in that particular case. Now, some people may say, well, yeah, but Bowman's going to be 11 out of 10. He's truly going to be the next Brock Bowers. Okay, well, if that's true, then it's a different scenario, but no one can predict that. I mean, we heard this from the Ravens GM the other day. I don't care about anybody's individual evaluation of an individual player. Even people that I openly acknowledge know more about football than I do. I don't care about individual evaluations. I'm looking at broad populations here. And when you look at a broad category of population, offensive tackle is just a very valuable position. Now, at this current price, I think Georgia's right to spend money elsewhere. I don't think it would have been smart for Georgia to spend allegedly $2.5 million on Jackson Cantwell. But take the names off of this, comparing OT to inside linebacker to tight end, offensive tackle is the more valuable of those comparisons.
I think, Brendan, especially we need to also bring up scarcity here, because Georgia has – now listen, it would be a fascinating discussion between me and you about, hey, do you win the race for Mark Bowman no matter what, considering you have Elias Williams, you have Ethan Barbour, and then you have at least another season of Jaden Riddell in your program at that position. I don't think there's scarcity at tight end, whereas offensive tackle, Brendan, we've written about this in the immediate Jackson Cantwell not going to Georgia story. Brendan, of the top 10 offensive tackles in the country, do you know how many Georgia still has a puncher's chance at getting? 1.
Yeah, I thought your story on this, now it's not great news, but I thought your story on this was really good, where you're probably talking about what's his face from Hawaii being kind of the only one of the top 10 offensive tackles that Georgia's like really potentially heavily involved with. And I do believe, based on your reporting, he took a visit for G-Day. So coming from Hawaii to Georgia is a significant step in all this. But I mean, I thought your reporting on this was very interesting, although not thrilling news, to say that if you're looking for a top 10 offensive tackle in the class of 2026, he's sort of your guy, right?
There's also Ekene Boko, Nnamdi's younger brother, who's rated by some as a swing tackle. He can play the guard or the tackle spot. He's actually rated as an interior offensive lineman. And Brent, I don't know how I feel about this. I think you might feel a different way about this, but what Georgia has after that is kind of what they've gotten in the past. They found those in-state diamonds in the rough. Maybe a Chris Booker, who's currently committed to Alabama at Hapeville Charter. They're players kind of all – there's a Wilson Zyrer who will be in town this weekend out of Rabun Gap. These are all these 15 to 30-ish offensive tackles in the country that Georgia feels they can coach them up, put them through the furnace of the Georgia program, and they can turn them out to be something. I might differ with that opinion, Brandon, because I think really there's a big difference between the Jackson Cantwells, the the Felix Ojos, the David Sanders of the world, the elite offensive tackle. It becomes a measure of like, yeah, that guy's going to be a first round draft pick anywhere versus if X and Y need to happen, then he'll play good football in the SEC.
But I won't pretend to be an expert on this. I really won't. But people love the in-state offensive tackles in Georgia for 2027. It's going to get the comparison of what, like, say, defensive line might have been in-state for a year ago. So once again, if Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green play awesome football this year, I'll never think about Jackson Cantwell ever again. He can go be a top 10 pick. As long as my guys in my program are taking care of business on the field, then whatever happens to Jackson Cantwell moving forward will be just sort of a footnote in the sports page to me at that point. And so, I don't think this is an immediate, what do you call it? Like I don't think this is an emergency for Georgia. I think they've got enough offensive tackles for right now. It sounds like in-state provides a lot of opportunities a cycle from now. So if this is a thin year for offensive tackle overall, if Georgia isn't heavily involved with some of the very best, then do what you can do now, bide yourself some time, and hit big in 2027. That's what Georgia did with Isaiah Gibson, Elijah Griffin, missed obviously on Justice Terry. But we knew a year. I mean, Jeff, this time, more than a year ago, I was peppering you all the time. Georgia's got to hit defensive line in state. They got to hit defensive line in state. Well, they did. They did. So now we'll spend a year saying Georgia's got to hit offensive line in state for 2027. And if history is our guide, they probably will. So that's sort of my feeling on that of, okay, so it's a thin year for offensive tackle overall. You're not heavily involved with some of the best. Then, and I apologize for not remembering the guy from Hawaii's name, but maybe get him, do what you can do now, and be ready to load up next year. And I think that's fine.
I think the way it feels better is, and this is pretty funny, Brandon. Malachi Lee, that's the young man out in Hawaii. Chris Booker, that's the guy that they'll have to fight with for Alabama. And then maybe Ekene Oboko out of North Carolina. Brandon, I think it's very fair to say you could get all three of those players for under $2.5 million, perhaps under $2 million. So yeah, if you want to play Moneyball with it, maybe that's the way to go.
So I thought you had an interesting story with Drew Rosenhaus. And listen, Rosenhaus is a guy that I've seen on TV in some form or fashion. It feels like all my life. I'm in favor of whatever rule system needs to be put in place to have less Drew Rosenhaus in college football. Fair or not, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I just don't want Drew Rosenhaus in college football. I'm in favor of whatever it takes to get less of that. How do you feel?
I think it's a weakness of the current system, Brandon. It allows, and I'm going to use the name he called himself in his autobiography, it allows these sharks in these waters when you have it so unregulated like this. And the fact that he can, Jackson was having fun with me when he described it, but like going for the jugular and taking souls. But I thought it was pretty interesting to show the scope of this agent. And yes, Brandon, he has ties to Miami. He has ties to South Florida. But then he was speaking about watching him on, I believe it was Hard Knocks. The Cantwell family was watching Drew Rosenhaus on Hard Knocks, and they're like, man, that guy's tough. That guy's unrelenting. We want him for us. That's the guy we want negotiating. I think it's just got to happen where, the one thing that really struck me, Brandon, is we actually shared this story on Before the Hedges this week with Kaylee Mansell. And we talked about our crazy luncheon where we were having lunch a couple hours before the decision. And you heard Rosenhaus in full agent mode talking about how good of a character Jackson is and how good of a pitchman he is and how well-spoken he is and how much he'll love Miami and Coach Mirabal and Coach Cristobal and everything else like that, where you kind of got to see a peek behind the curtain. And Brendan will admit, we know how these things are going to go most of the time, but it seemed like to me there was a really radical change in this one late, like what would mimics and mirrors what we saw with Justice Terry as well.
Interesting stuff. It's scavenger hunt weekend for Georgia. Give me a little thumbnail about what this is going to look. It's become one of those dates in the calendar that just sort of happens every year. Give me a little bit of a look at what that's going to be like for Georgia this particular year.
It's different, Brandon. They're populating it with a lot more official visitors than we've ever seen. Usually it was just like one or two just fitting guys in. I believe there'll be almost double-digit official visitors. Two unofficial visitors, you've already mentioned one of those names, Brandon. Xavier Griffin is expected to be in from Gainesville High School, still a very speedy, projectionable type first-round type talent. And then you also have Kamari Brooks, Brandon, who I think is going to try eventually and challenge either Tyler Atkinson or the KJ Bolden unofficial record for most trips to Georgia as a recruit. That's been Georgia and Alabama for a while. He's an unofficial visitor along with Xavier Griffin. But then also, Brandon, you've got a mega guy to watch. Ryan Mosley out of Carrollton High School. He's taking his official visit. You've got Nick Abrams, the second out of Maryland, a guy that Georgia really likes as a linebacker, either as an instead of or as well as Tyler Atkinson at linebacker. Brandon, let me stress this. Abrams is a guy that is a Georgia fit, culture on and off the field. And when Schumann handpicks his guys, he went to see him recently as well. His hit rate on these guys is really, really strong, both on and off the field.
Jeff, great stuff. Anything else just on your mind from a recruiting standpoint worth paying attention to? It feels like there's a lot going on right now. We're getting into official visit season. A lot of these pieces in some form or fashion going to fall into place when it comes to this 2026 class. To conclude here, is there anything I didn't ask you about that I should have?
I'll tell you what, there's a name, Brandon, that's really rising fast. He has jumped leaps and bounds over the last couple of weeks. He actually made it on the top targets list this week for Before the Hedges for the first time. That is Craig Dandridge at Cambridge Christian, Brandon. You talk to a lot of people, they feel like Craig is as good as any wide receiver that Georgia is currently recruiting, even the outstanding Ryan Mosley. Brandon, he just had a night last night against Walton in the spring game. He produces. Coley is prioritizing him. He's in state. He's not a top 10 wide receiver, so it won't take top 10 of these. Brandon, that is a fast rising name to know for people in the Georgia football recruiting sphere.
For those listening podcasts, Jeff bringing his fingers together, rubbing them as if it was dollar bills, and the gesture you've perhaps seen before. Jeff, great stuff. Very, very interesting. Thanks for your time here today. We'll look forward to reading plenty more from you at DawgNation.com. You mentioned before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Great recruiting information each and every Wednesday. Incredible behind-the-scenes look back at the Jackson Cantwell stuff earlier this week. It's been really fun to follow all this. There's plenty more excitement to come in this class of 2026. Jeff, I appreciate your time. I look forward to hearing from you and reading from you everything that goes on with the scavenger hunt here this weekend.
Hey, Brandon, thanks, man. And we all knew that you would have a squeaky clean refrigerator, man. That's just how you get down. Polished, perfection. Probably got a GE or LG ad coming down the pipe here as well, man. Good seeing you.
Who knows about that? Jeff, good stuff. Thanks for your time.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, great stuff from Jeff Sentell. Knew he'd have a lot to offer today, and I think he got that. Interesting visitors coming in, official visitors, as Jeff mentions, for that scavenger hunt, and a lot of big names still out there for Georgia when it comes to this class of 2026. We're going to cover all of that. Let's also get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I'm laughing because I'm doing the show from home today. You already know that. But, I get so used this happened yesterday, too, where right when the show began, there was a little bit of an audio malfunction for me, and I almost just sort of froze up. I was like, this is so different. Doing the show from home is kind of the same way, where normally for cruising around the SEC, I get ready to look at a different camera to do that, but there's only one. It's just my, basically my laptop camera here right now, but I'm still wanting to turn to do cruise around the SEC, which we're not doing here today. So I'm just a weird person. That's the overall takeaway from all of that. But let me tell you what's not weird. That's all the exciting stuff that Royal Caribbean has coming for you the rest of this year into 2026 and beyond. So much of that being celebrated here this week. Now, you already know about Star of the Seas. It's the brand new Icon class of ship that's going to debut this August, sailing out of Port Canaveral. We're really excited about that. We think the Icon of the Seas is one of the amazing introductions in the cruise space ever, and Star of the Seas is going to take it to that same next level. And honestly, I'm so hopeful that I get my chance to enjoy this and be a part of it. But also, the new things from Royal Caribbean are going to keep right on rolling. And we're going to, once we introduce this brand new ship, now we're introducing brand new destinations, private destinations, exclusively for those on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. You perhaps know the Royal Beach Club is coming to Paradise Island in the Bahamas by the end of this year. A chance to make a Nassau cruise stop unlike anything it's ever been before if you were on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. Then beyond that, start thinking about Perfect Day Mexico, the brand new Royal Beach Club coming to Cozumel. So many fun new things that Royal Caribbean is doing to redefine the experience you have while you're on the ship That's what Icon of the Seas and Star of the Seas are all about. But to also redefine the experience you get when the cruise ship goes to visit these wonderful destinations. That's what it's all about as well. And you only get that on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. I'm telling you right now, this brand is red hot. They're dominant in the space, and it seems to only be going up from here. So I'm excited about all the new stuff on the way. I hope to get my chance to experience it personally, and I hope you'll get your chance to do that too. If you want to, Royal Caribbean says, hey, the best way to get the most out of a great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation is through a terrific travel agent and travel advisor such as Jessica Slater. Jessica's the one to know here on this. You can email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She can get you in on all of that and get you enjoying all of the stuff on Star of the Seas and everything else there as well. So reach out to her. You can also give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. Email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, a lot of talk about recruiting and NIL today. Let's bring it back to on the field here for a moment. And, we can live in a world now, for those of you who care about betting and point spreads, things like that, where it used to be, the euphemism was Las Vegas says this and Las Vegas says that. Hey, Vegas says Georgia's a favorite this weekend. You've heard that said, perhaps you said that yourself. We kind of live in a world now where Nevada is not even the state that produces the most sports betting revenue in a given year. Far more bet legally even outside of Nevada than there is inside of Nevada. Las Vegas is kind of a little bit more of a conservative place for sports betting than it used to be. They move a little slower. They have a little bit slightly different rules. But we are starting to hear from some of the prominent Vegas sports books about the upcoming season. Our guy Brett McMurphy sharing from Circa, which is a big college football friendly sports book out in Las Vegas, win totals in the SEC for the upcoming year. And I want to kind of bounce through a few of these here for a moment. Looking, of course, at the three teams, the top, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. You asked the question, which one of these teams is not like the other? Well, both Georgia and Texas were in the college football playoff a year ago and played for the SEC title. By comparison, Alabama had the disappointing season, missing the playoff, losing 3 times. But when it comes this upcoming year, even with the changeover at quarterback and everything else, expectations remain really high for the Crimson Tide. It's also interesting to hear Kalen DeBoer try to sell this. He's going to pin their hopes for turnaround on the fact that the loss they had last season, with the exception of the Oklahoma loss, many of these were close, kind of one-score type games. So he believes that turnaround is possible. But the one thing that we do know is that I think moving into 2025, this feels a lot less like the Nick Saban program that DeBoer inherited. And one way or another, it sort of feels like the footprints, the fingerprints, I should say, for DeBoer are on this team. His era officially begins this year. That is a really, really high win total for Alabama, I think. And obviously, as we've been saying, and we're going to talk more about this in the days to come, man, that is also a very, very big game for Georgia in September. The month of September is huge for Georgia. Alabama's a big part of that. Let's look at the teams at 8.5 here for a moment. And these are all regular season win totals. Keep in mind, this is just your 12 regular season games. LSU, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. LSU, has been a little bit of an off-season darling here thus far. Ole Miss, it's interesting that I think that their win total is actually going to be higher than their preseason ranking is going to be. A team with a win total of 8.5 has a pretty high preseason ranking. I think that Ole Miss actually going to start a lot lower than that because I don't think that people buy into the quality of this year's transfer class compared to a year ago. As we've said, Austin Simmons is one of the guys who a lot is going to be pinned on for this upcoming year. But let's also focus on Tennessee here. We mentioned the month of September for Georgia, going to obviously host Alabama, but also going to Tennessee just prior to that. And for everything that's been said about Tennessee, and Nico Iamaleava this, and the millions of dollars he wanted, and the fact that Tennessee didn't do that, and now the Vols don't know who their starting quarterback is going to be. I want you to pay attention to this. The Tennessee win total has not changed. It's been 8.5. It remains 8.5. That the consequence of losing Nico Iamaleava is a much bigger deal on message boards and in the media than it is in the actual odds makers' eyes. That Nico is essentially a replacement level quarterback. And whatever Tennessee replaces him with will essentially be, at least in the eyes of the odds makers, a fairly similar performance. Now, listen, when they get it wrong, sometimes even they get it wrong. But it's important to keep that in mind, that even though Nico has been the hottest SEC topic of the last couple of months, the actual impact of Nico's departure on Tennessee's season win record, according to the odds makers at Circa, and FanDuel has the same number up, it's essentially nil. That's worth keeping in mind. Let me show you a couple of other of these here just for a moment. I think it's interesting that Auburn is at 8. I've told you before, of all the teams, and everybody's sort of looking for like the surprise team in the SEC, to me, it's Auburn more so than anything else. More so than Oklahoma, who's gotten a lot of love lately, more so than Florida, who's gotten a lot of love from some pockets of the media. Of course, I'm a Gator hater, but try to take this as objective as I'm capable of being. I like Auburn more so than that. It's interesting, for all we've heard about Florida, several prominent media voices trying to put them in their preseason top 10. Win total still sits here at 7.5. That means 8-4 exceeds expectations for people who are willing to put their money where their mouth is. If you give them all 4 of their non-conference games, they don't have, quite as difficult of a non-conference schedule as they had a year ago, especially with the downturn for the Florida State program. That means to exceed expectations, they only have to go 4-4 in the SEC. Given the fact they will have some winnable conference games, there is a chance that Florida could exceed expectations without being much of a factor in the eyes of the better teams in the SEC, such as the LSUs and the Georgias and the teams like that. So keep in mind that even if Florida is better than it was a year ago against the schedule that it's facing, it could still be toting a good number of losses here. That's one of the reasons why we think some of the praise of Florida, even though we do genuinely respect DJ Lagway as a coach, some of that we think has perhaps been overstated. Let me run through a couple of more of these here real quick to sort of see what else is out there when it comes to those win totals, sort of moving down the list a little bit. For all the love that Oklahoma's gotten, they're still sitting there at 7. That's probably a more accurate number. Then when it comes to the bottom of the league, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Mississippi State, probably going to be hard for Vanderbilt to replicate what it did a year ago. And as a lot of these teams seem to be kind of on the rise, there are going to be some easy wins to be had at others' expenses. You kind of wonder, if you wanted to sort of combine some of this together, what would you get on the possibility of that Arkansas, Vandy, Kentucky, Mississippi State, all 4 sort of go under their number? I think all 4 of those teams are probably set up for a pretty rough season, especially as it kind of gets more competitive in the middle and top of the SEC. There could be an attempt to sort of devour that sort of bottom quadrant, and that may be, what Arkansas, Vandy, Kentucky, and Mississippi State have to deal with. For now, let's make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And speaking of the rough and tumble SEC, that's obviously true in football. It is also true when it comes to baseball, too. And Georgia thus far doing a really good job of navigating all that, playing its final regular season series here against Texas A&M, getting a win last night, 10-6 after a deficit earlier. We're going to roll into our long finish here, presented by the Finnish Long Drink. Facing an early deficit, make a key pitching change, stabilize, go on to get that 10-6 win. And now Georgia playing today and then on Saturday has a chance to win another series, which would sweep the home slate here this year. Georgia a winner in every home series it's faced. That's a key number given the fact that as they've now exceeded their SEC win total from a year ago, really kind of putting themselves, do I have this right? That if they get their 19th conference win, they haven't done that in forever, like pre-pandemic, I think, since the last time they've done that. So this is a Georgia team making a very strong case right now to be that national seed, to host an NCAA regional, to host an NCAA super regional. That's a big deal. And, if you've been kind of in and out on baseball, because obviously a lot of people are busy this time of year, it's time to get back into it, because there is, in our mind, very few things more fun than postseason baseball, regionals, super regionals, run towards Omaha. And thankfully, we think that Georgia can be a really big part of all of this, especially given the fact that after all the winning that Georgia's done, Georgia coach Wes Johnson thinks they still have another gear to get to that they perhaps haven't even gotten to yet. This is Wes Johnson on that.
I still haven't seen us. We've gotten close a couple times, right, to play some complete games. But I think it just shows that, you got to keep working. There's that old Southern saying, the hay's in the barn, but we got to take the mindset it's never in the barn, right? We got to keep growing the grass and cutting the hay and keep working and try to get better each day.
So very good from Wes Johnson there. Great. Remember now, this is an A&M team that began the year #1 team in the country, and they're playing a lot closer to 500 right now. They need this series more than Georgia does. The fact that Georgia got that win last night, has a chance to win the series again. Pretty strong statement there by Georgia on that. We'll make that cruising. Excuse me. We'll make that your long finish, presented by the Finnish Long Drink. And as you're getting ready to enjoy some great weekend stuff here, hanging out with the neighbors, perhaps back patio, out playing some golf, pool weather, all of that going on, the Finnish Long Drink, we think, just goes great with all of that. So put in your zip code at the website, thelongdrink.com. You can find out where to pick some up, whether it's the Long Drink Zero, the Long Drink, the peach-flavored version, the Peach State. You love that. The Long Drink Cranberry, my wife, she still loves that. Long Drink, the traditional citrus in the blue can, the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick. I guess that'll probably always be my favorite. Long Drink Strong. Folks like that too. So make sure you check that out online at thelongdrink.com. And as we wrap up here today, we'll give you a golden shoe. Speaking of Tennessee, big road game for Georgia. A lot has been said about the fact that Tennessee is now planning, as we told you yesterday, to checkerboard the end zone. They want the intense atmosphere. A lot of Georgia fans have used that to reminisce about some of their favorite moments in Neyland Stadium in recent years, of which, thankfully to say, there have been many. I'll show you this as our golden shoe here today. One Georgia fan in particular, Mr. Cheek, writing in to say, hey, where'd all these fans go? You see a great picture from him of an emptying out Neyland Stadium. Georgia's done a lot of that in Neyland Stadium in recent years, and we love to see that. We'll give him a golden shoe for celebrating all the success that Georgia has had in Neyland Stadium. Hoping for some more here in 2025. Another Georgia rival, but those lousy, stinking Gators. Some people think they'll be better. We just don't think they'll be good enough to beat Georgia. About 1,651 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here Monday. Brand new studio. We'll see you then. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn 2 for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. All right. It is one trip around the comment section for us here today. We're kind of in the midst of transitioning some stuff, which means that I won't bore you the details, but we got some back-end work we're going to do today. So let me do one trip around the comment section, and then I'll give you permission to get weekend started early after that. All right, on YouTube. Jonathan Aaron says, how in the world were you late for the 1st and 10 when you – first of all, the name of it is not 1st and 10 anymore, and I hate to say this, but the name of it is the show before the show. 1st and 10, that's already been used. So look, I personally love being able to have a comment or two and chat with some people prior to the start of the show. Love doing that. I love being interactive. I would still say I don't believe that there's anyone in the college football space. I don't think there's anybody in the college football space on any platform that's more interactive with their audience than I choose to be, because I genuinely love it. Genuinely love it. But, I genuinely love it. But there's also a lot going on. Jerry Dogfan said, would you wear a pair of black and red checkerboard overalls? No, I would not. First of all, I don't think I look good in overalls. That's not a flattering look for me, probably. I'm not necessarily against others doing it, but that's probably not a flattering look for me. Let's see what else. Andrew Hughes says, what happens to NIL, sponsorship, et cetera, when they enter the transfer portal? Do they keep a percentage or they forfeit it? Well, we're led to believe, and once again, very little of this is ever reported on the record, but there's enough substantial rumor stuff that we think this is probably true. That in certain situations, and perhaps a lot more than we realize, there is a buyout that has to be paid back to the program. That in this day and age, we'll see how this changes with kind of the new structure that's going to somehow come into place. In this day and age, that what you're actually, when you're signing, that you're not really signing a letter of intent as much anymore as you are least the last few years, been signing with the collective. And there is some sort of recourse in place for that collective in some cases, we were led to believe. Let us see what else. Plush checking in on a job site from Houston, Texas. Man, I appreciate you listening to that, Plush. Thank you so much. And we love being out there for people who are doing hard work. Really do. There's nothing that makes me feel more like the work that I do matters. That when people are doing real work, not laptop class, not pushing a piece of paper around, but when people are doing real work or listening to our show while they're doing it. I just love that. I love it so much. Thank you very much. I really do. Paul Moon says he assumes that Austin Mack is the guy in 2025 for Bama. I do too, Paul. Now, that's not what the board keeps saying, which makes me believe I'm probably even more correct. But that's not what he's saying. He's talking a lot about Ty Simpson. A lot of people around the Bama program have talked about the veteran in place there, Ty Simpson, veteran by the fact that he's just been there longer. But I am very much of the belief that that when it's all said and done, Austin Mack is that guy. For instance, the very specific prediction I have made is that I don't care who plays the early weeks for Alabama. When Georgia plays Alabama in September, they will more likely, whether he comes in during the game or makes his first start for that game or whatever else. I believe that Mack is probably going to end up being the guy. I really do. All right, let's get a couple of comments. Bill Sanders says, even on a home show, Facebook does get more than 30 seconds. So I've always said that the one platform I can count to criticize me is DawgNation.com. Now it's Facebook too, which just goes to show no good deed goes unpunished. No good deed goes unpunished. Let's see what else. Jacob O'Neill asking about the desk. Now, we did get the desk here. We did get the desk here. So we're going to see about getting something up and running here at some point in time. Gary Holt checking out. Gary, appreciate you being here. Let's see what else. Looking for some good comments to read over on Facebook. I'll come back and try Facebook again in a minute. Let me get some DawgNation.coms. Let's see what else. Over here at DawgNation.com. Let's see what else. Yeah, they're talking about some of the offensive line recruiting stuff. So I thought we got some good stuff from Jeff on that today. I really did. Randy Hall says, how about a special show next week to view the new studio? Maybe we will do some of that. Maybe we'll do it on a different platform to give you a little bit more of a look at it. We've kind of done some of that kind of stuff in the past. Maybe we will do that. Maybe we will do that. Also, if you want to go back and see the Cantwell and the Curtis thing, now we only used like the one shot. It was pretty tight, zoomed in, but that was from the new studio. Bill Camacho says he knows for a fact that the Dogs will continue the unbeaten streak at home. So sometime next month, I'll do the countdown to the home winning streak. Listen, I'm telling you right now, there are a few sort of, I would say, leading indicators. If Georgia goes undefeated at home again this year, boy, that's going to go a long way towards making you think they can be involved in anything else they want to do. Goes a long way towards that. Philip Jordan Wells in here having fun. Tennille Calvino getting ready to check out. Appreciate that. By the way, Errol Fender predicting that Georgia's going to beat Alabama by 9 points. Listen, I'll take it at this point. I'll take a 1-point win. I'll take a 9-point win. I'll take just about anything. That is for sure. Let me get a couple final ones on YouTube here and we'll get ready to go. Let's see what else. Cherry Dog fan wonders if my man cave is decked out in Texas A&M memorabilia. Hey, I did not have a basement. I had a basement in our old house. I do not have a basement here. We were on a slab, as they say. But no, No Texas A&M stuff, no. But I am glad to know I still get grief for that all these years later. Let's see what else. Chef Jay Bowen says if the Dogs win all their home games, they're going to win the national title. I mean, I think they probably – I think they would have a very good chance of doing that too. I really do. Andrew Hughes likes the idea of sort of a replica trophy wall in the new studio. I think it's a pretty good idea. I have brought home a lot of my sort of Dog Nation artifacts over the years. And, my intent is to at some point in time have a nice collection of that stuff up on the wall. I am hopeful to do that. I have a little office space that I'm hoping to kind of make into that. Looking forward to that. Our buddy DawgHouse Lawn Care, you're glad to see him. Good stuff there on that front. All right, so we're going to get ready to go. Hope you have a great weekend. Check out our friends at RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. I told you summer's essentially here, hot weather basically here. So get your AC unit tuned up to factory fresh spec. Stay cool and comfortable. Get some new life out of your old AC unit. Enjoy all of that. Also have a great weekend from a brand new studio on Monday. All things going well, hopefully anyway. We will see you there for that DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then.